Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the blindseyepodcast, the podcast discussing everything you did and didn't want to know about being blind. My name is Connor, and today I thought we would talk about using trains. So, how I use trains, how I know what trains I'm on, how I know what part of the train I'm on, how I, get on and off safely, find a seat, get off at the other end, and all that kind of fun stuff. So let's get into that. Usual boring disclaimer, just my thoughts and opinions. Some people will do this differently to me. I mean, we kind of get, as in blind people, at least within Australia, we kind of get shown the basic ways that are all quite similar to each other, but I guess everyone kind of develops their own style. So yeah, keep that in mind. Okay, so when it comes to using trains, obviously I use them quite a lot, or at least I did, when it was safe to mingle with the public in such a confined space. But yeah, like I would generally use trains and taxis, sometimes buses, but I don't particularly like buses and have some difficulties with that, which I plan to go into in another episode. But trains and taxis would be my main one. So, in terms of trains, the first thing I guess I need to let you know that I try and learn whatever stations I need to beforehand. So I might call out a guide dog instructor or a mobility instructor and say, you know, I go to this area often. I would like to know how to get around this station. So where the platforms are, how many they are, um, things like that. So that's the first one. It wouldn't be that often that I would just rock up on a station that I wasn't really familiar with. But there are options open to you if that happens. So there's a transport hotline that you can call. You might want to call them if there's an issue on the train, and that's just for the general public. But for somebody like myself, I could call ahead and say, "Hey, look, I'm going to be getting to this station on platform such and such at this time. I'm on this carriage. Would somebody be able to meet me there because I don't really know the platform and the layout, so I need a little bit of help because sometimes you want to go somewhere and you can't always spend 4 weeks learning how to get there with an instructor." The other thing which is important to mention off the bat is I also use apps to know what's happening on the transport system. So there are lots of generic apps for everybody who might be traveling to work and stuff like that. I use one called TripView, which is primarily between Sydney and Melbourne. And with TripView, I can go on there and I can punch in either the different bus routes or train lines that I want to be traveling on, or the stations I need to get on and off at, and it will tell me, where those trains will stop, what platforms they leave from, and also, which is really handy, what platforms they arrive in on at the other end. And they will tell me how many stops will be on the way, what platforms those stops will be at, maybe whether it's an air conditioned service, how many carriages there are, all these kinds of things, whether it's a direct service or even if there's one where you might have to switch halfway and change platforms. And those apps, thankfully, that I use are quite accessible. So I'm able to get the full experience and as much information ahead of time so I know what I'm about to, I guess, embark on. And I don't kind of just have to wing it and hope for the best. So, with those two things in mind, I thought I would explain how I would manage my local station. So, I learned how everything was. There's 4 platforms there, and what happens is I would arrive maybe by taxi or I might get a lift down there, and I would tell Licorice, my guide dog, to find the stairs. And she basically knows after so many times, what I'm talking about. And they try and teach the guide dogs to find you the right handrail going upstairs because you hold every guide dog in your left hand. So it means your free hand is your right hand. So the dog will try and line you up with the railing where your right hand is, which is really handy. Now, we don't always do that because we've kind of just developed different habits, but that's how, at least in my area, all the dogs are trained. And that's the same with finding the door on the train. So when the door's open, if I tell Lick to find the door, she will find the right hand edge of the door so that my free hand can touch the door. So that's really handy. But anyway, so we go up the stairs and we'll come to the gates. And usually at train station, there's thin gates, and some of them are going in, some of them are going out, depending on what time of the day it is. And there's a wide gate, which might be used for people in wheelchairs or maybe elderly people that might have walkers and stuff like that. And generally, I try to use that wide gate because it's wide enough for both of us to walk through side by side. When we get through to the other side of the concourse, then I choose which platform I want. And the neat thing about the train line closest to me is that it runs east to west. And I've basically worked out that every single metropolitan train station in Sydney on that line has the exact same order of sequence in terms of platforms. And what I mean by that is, on that western line, the most northerly platform will always be 1. So that always tells me that as long as I know where north is, I know where platform 1 is. And obviously where platform 1 is, platform 2 usually is. So for me, I know that if I get off at any station, as long as I can kind of keep my bearings along that line and know which way north is, I have a general idea of what platform I'm not only getting on at, but also which platform I'm getting off at, which comes in really handy. Unfortunately, I don't really know if that's a uniform thing in other parts of Sydney or the country. I can't imagine it is, but it's one of those things where after a while you kind of notice patterns in the system that you never had really paid attention to before, and you can use those sort of to keep a kind of mental checklist of where you are and which way you might be facing. So let's say I come through the gate and I'm looking for platform 1, and I know platform 1 has eastbound trains. So it always has eastbound trains, and platform 4 in the same station always has westbound trains. So if I'm going to platform 1, I know I turn left, I find the stairs to go down, and then I usually stop a few meters beyond the end of the stairs. And the reason I do that is that, as another pattern kind of behavior, I realized and I got taught that if you get on the train at the same place along a platform, then when the train gets to the next stop, or the stop that you're looking for, you kind of have a fair idea about where along the next platform you're going to be getting off at. So I know when I walk down those stairs and wait within a few meters of that platform, that a door is going to basically pull up in front of me within a few meters. What I also tend to do, if I can, is to find the edge of the platform. And a lot of people would be familiar with the little tactiles, we call them, that run along the edges of all train platforms. So they're kind of like tiny little rubber circles, and that might be kind of a foot wide in some of the areas, and they might feel a bit grippy, and they might be colored in yellow or some kind of highlighted color. And that is for somebody like myself to know, hey, I'm coming to the edge now, because obviously that's a bit of an issue. I do know people who've fallen off train platforms. Thankfully, I haven't been one of them. But it's a good way for me to be able to tell Lick to find the edge and move forward. And then once I feel them underfoot, I know to stand behind them. And it also means that I know I'm in a good position to immediately get on the train when I'm there, and I'm not trying to just rush through the crowd, especially during peak hour and things like that, where, you know, you kind of almost have to pick your good spot because you can get left behind or people can get in your way, and then things can get kind of chaotic, and that's when accidents happen. So I'll find the edge of that. I'll keep my toes on the start of that, and I'll hear the train pulling in. And obviously, I'll hear the train pulling in based on the direction. So I know if it's heading east on this particular platform, that the train will come in from left to right. So that's my first indication that I'm in the right place. So the train will pull in, you'll hear it slow down, and then when the doors are opening, you'll obviously hear the hiss of the hydraulics opening the doors, but you'll also hear a high pitched beeping coming from where the doors are. So that lets me know, I can listen with my ears, okay, that there's a door closer on my left hand side than there is on my right hand side. And then generally what I will do is I will tell Lick to, find left, find the door if I'm heading for the one to my left, and I will put my right hand along, I will actually put my right hand on the train and will walk along the train. So Lick will be on the inside of me, facing the rest of the platform. I will feel with my hand on the train, so then I always know where it is and how close I am to the gap. And I walk along until I feel the edge of the door. And then I'll tell her to get on, and we'll both get on. And if it's a train that I know quite well, then generally I'm able to tell whether I'm in a middle carriage or at the end of the train based on where I was standing on the platform. So if I'm getting onto the little vestibule area that might be in the middle of the carriages where people sit down and you have the stairs to go up and down and stuff like that, I'll go in and I'll use my feet to kind of see if I can feel the bottom of the seats down there. I don't really bother going up and down into the more packed seating area. I like to stay close to the door so I can get away, and it also means there's more room for Lick to kind of be out of the way and it's not uncomfortable for her. Sometimes, especially now as I've kind of gotten older and more comfortable in my own skin, I will actually just get on the train and just say, are there any seats in here? And whoever's there will say, yeah, mate, over here, over there, whatever. Especially when it's like a packed train in peak hour, if I'm coming home from work, there might be standing room only and that kind of stuff. So instead of me trying to just bump my way around, I'll just ask the train load full of people, and I've just found that's the easier way to do it. I was always a bit self-conscious about doing that in the beginning, but I just kind of got used to the whole situation and found that, most people are willing to help if they're asked, and it just makes things a little bit more, smooth. If I haven't gotten on one of those middle vestibule areas, I will try and get on the very end of the train. And the reason I do that, I don't know if this is the way it works in other cities, but at least in Sydney, at the very back of the last carriage usually has a tiny little vestibule area where there's one seat by itself. And there's space there for maybe people that might have a wheelchair and things like that. But that one seat also means that I can sit there without having to scramble past loads of other people. And the door is right beside me, so all I need to do is sit there, and then when my stop comes, I can just get up, just do a complete 180 around a pole, and the door's right there. And it makes it a lot quicker and safer for me to get off rather than having to push through and worry about stairs and compact seating arrangements and all that kind of stuff. If I'm sitting there, then, I'll probably get out my headphones, listen to music, but I'll always pay attention to either the announcements of, obviously what station I'm passing, but I'll also pay attention to how often the train stops, because sometimes on the train line I'm on, the announcements are automatic and sometimes they are just manually done by the drivers, and sometimes you can hear them better than others and all this kind of stuff. So I can't rely on that. So I try to, I will have looked at my app beforehand and say, okay, there's 7 stops before the station I want. So I will count how many times the train stops. And, when we pull into another station, I listen for the platform announcements saying, the train on platform such and such, next stop, yada yada. And then that'll let me know, okay, I know where I am along this journey, and it'll give me a bit more kind of self-assurance that I'm on the right path. When I'm about to pull up to the platform I want, I'll generally get Lick up and myself to the handle at the door that I want about a minute beforehand, just again, so I don't have to batter my way through people. And I'll hold on to that handle, and then when the door opens right in front of me, I can jump off straight away. And, you always have to be, I always kind of make sure to do an over-pronounced leap just to mind the gap, because some stations it's not very wide and some stations it is. I have had a few close calls where I almost fell through, or I lost my balance, or I had some members of the public who I guess were trying to help me, but in their, how shall I say, in their eagerness to help, they actually almost caused an accident. And I will go into that on another episode at some point, because, yeah, that kind of deserves its own episode in itself. But I'll jump off the train, and if it's a platform I know and a station that I know, I will know to go, okay, I need to get off the train, and I turn right and I walk down the platform, and I know that's where the stairs are or the escalators. If it's a train platform that I don't know, I might ask somebody that's also getting off the train which way they are, or I might have put in that call ahead of time, as I said, for somebody to meet me. And I'll just kind of wait around. And, I'm pretty obvious that, I've got a guide dog and stuff like that, so somebody might find me. But I try to not use that. I try to do it myself, or just ask somebody for a bit of, directions. Now, you might say, okay, how do you find escalators or stairs? Because it's one thing to come down the escalators or stairs when you're getting onto the platform, but trying to find them to get off is a different matter. And it is a different matter. And it kind of depends, because some platforms have those same versions of tactiles that mark the edges of the platform. They have what are called directional versions of that. So they might cut in on a 90-degree angle from the ones that line the edge of the platform, and you'll feel them underfoot, and they will go directly to the start of the stairs or the start of the escalator. So in that case, I would just walk down the platform until I feel those going underfoot from left to right, and then I'll just follow them away from where I know the edge of the platform is, and I know that I'll either find a handrail for the stairs or I'll find the handrail for the escalator. Unfortunately, those aren't standardized. Some stations have them. Some stations put them down in the right way. Some stations don't. It's not really a uniform law, which is a shame, and which I know a lot of people are working on to try and to get it done, because it's such a simple addition which makes the world a difference for somebody like myself just to be able to do it on my own, because sometimes you can get off the train and you're the only person getting off the train, so you don't have the luxury of asking somebody who's just gotten off that is beside you, hey, could you let me know what's going on? But in those cases, I'll try to use that. In cases where those tactiles don't exist, what I will do is I will try and listen for the sound of the escalator, or listen to the sound of people going up or down stairs. And by this point, Licorice knows what an escalator is and what stairs are. So for the most part, if I tell her to find the escalator or find the stairs, she will get me there. She might not always get me there with 100% accuracy, but she'll get me to within a close enough distance that I'll be able to hear in what direction things are, and then I'll be able to give her a couple of extra commands to, hone in on exactly what I want. And then I'll find the handrail of either the escalator or the stairs and use that to walk up and out. I personally don't like to use lifts on at train stations because I find they just mess with my orientation in terms of, you're having to turn around different ways, and and it might drop you off at a different part of the platform than you're used to, or you might go in the escalator on one side of the lift. Oh, so you might go in the lift on one side, and then the doors behind you will open when you get to the level you want, and then you're facing another way. And so for my little internal compass, I find that really turns me around and messes with me, so I don't even really worry about it. Now, I did mention close calls with members of the public, so I'll be brief because, as I said, I want to go into this at a later stage with a fuller episode. But in terms of actual train stations, I usually have two kinds of encounters. So the first is somebody who kind of decides that they know what it is you're trying to do and will just manhandle you. And a lot of times they won't even say anything, they'll just grab you. So, for example, I had an instance where I was trying to go through the gates on the concourse, and this person obviously got it in their head that the wide gate was the one that I must use, or the one that I, in their mind, I wanted to use, even though I knew full well that I was about to go through the thinner ones and I was happy to do so. I think in this case, I was at a station where the accessible gates are sometimes locked. So, you learn these things, and you decide, oh, look, I'll just go through the thin ones. They work automatically, and it's just easier than me having to wait around for somebody to press a button. So in this particular case, I was about to walk through the thin gates, and this gentleman behind me, without actually saying a word, just grabbed my backpack and just started dragging me to the left. And I started saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he just didn't answer anything, didn't say anything. So I kind of thought maybe I was being mugged. And then, he dragged me over in front of the wide gate, and then he said, "Oh, there's the gate." And it's really hard because in this fella's mind, he was helping me out, but at the same time, he was kind of assaulting me. And I had to actually just say, "Hey, man, like, I knew exactly where I was, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to go through this gate, and I don't have to go through this gate. And for all I know, you were attacking me. Like, you weren't even saying a word. You didn't even ask me if I wanted assistance or anything like that. You didn't even make a noise. So how am I supposed to know the difference between your intention to help or, whether you were, going through my backpack and stuff like that?" And it's kind of hard because in some people's minds, they get offended by the fact that I'm not really, obliging of the situation or appreciative. But in that case, it's just very, like, humiliating. It's kind of scary, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, and the other main, I guess, situation is when I'm on the platform, and same again, somebody just either decides to drag me towards the door or give me directions and stuff like that. And I don't really mind the directions side of things. Sometimes they can usually be wrong. Like, it's amazing the amount of time people say left when they mean right, and and that's kind of caused some issues. So now I just kind of do my own thing and say, "Oh, thanks very much." But I've had instances where people are trying to drag me over the gap, or I'm getting off the train and I'm about to step over the gap, and a person just grabs my backpack from behind as I'm halfway over the gap, and they say, "Oh, there's a gap there." And the fact that they've done that almost made me fall down the gap with the dog. And the same again, in their mind, they're helping me, but they've actually just almost created the situation they thought that they were going to prevent. And I think it just comes down to that lack of knowledge that, you're not just out on the train system winging it and hoping for the best. I remember this one particular encounter where I was at a station in Sydney, Strathfield. It's one of the busier stations. And this guy said, "Hey man, do you need help?" And I said, "No, look, thanks very much. I'm good. I know where I'm going." Walked on for a few meters. Same guy, "Hey, are you sure you don't need help?" I said, "No, mate. Like, trust me. Like, it's all good. I come here every day. You know, I'm going to work. Like, have a good one." And then he said again, "Oh, I'll help you." And then he grabbed me and started dragging me in the direction he thought I wanted to go. And I had to just stop him and say, "Dude, like, I know where I'm going. Like, I didn't walk out my front door and just hope to get to work or just hope I'd end up on the right station." And again, it's hard because in that person's mind, he's helping me out, he's doing me a favor, but it's actually kind of getting in the way of my process. And my process isn't necessarily everybody else's process, but, you know, I don't just hope to take a 40-kilometer trip and, you know, just hope that I know where the gap is or hope that this is the right train. Like, there's a method to it. But unfortunately, I guess people don't really know that there's a method to it, which is, you know, why I'm doing this episode. But yeah, they're generally the kind of encounters I've had. But thankfully, you know, nothing too major. But yeah, so look, I hope that was interesting. I plan to do another couple episodes on different kinds of other public transport. But yeah, obviously the trains being a big one. So stay tuned for those. So I'm going to do like buses, taxis, and planes, particularly planes because I like to fly. And yeah, so I'll try and get those out in the next couple of weeks. Okay, so in the meantime, you can email the show with any questions or anything by getting in touch at blindseyepodcast@gmail.com. That's BLINDSEYE podcast@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at blindseyepod, and we're on Facebook if you just search for Blindseye Podcast. And I will catch you next week. Thanks.